Okay, today I'm going to talk about how to use source code to make your Brightspace pages, web pages or files 100% accessible, digitally accessible. So first, let me show you um, what kind of file we are working on today. So this is my Brightspace module for my evolution course. And so I have a sub-module here where I create files. So if there's upload and create, if I click here, and there will be create a file. So in Brightspace, create a file meaning create a web page. And if you click on here, and then it will lead you to another, I can show you here, another page where you can create that page. And let me show you a page that I have created. For example, this is a capstone course. I gave students a reading material. I gave them a reading guide. I asked them questions while they read these chapters from this book. So creating this kind of file is called a file, but actually it's a HTML web page. And today I'm going to show you how to use source code to make this kind of file fully digital accessible. So before I start my presentation, I just want to show you where we can get to the source code. So this is a web page I created. If you click Edit HTML, and then this is HTML editor. And right here, this is a source code editor. It looks like angle brass bracket. And if you click here, that's a source code. This is look very complicated, but we don't need to edit everything here. We just need to modify it a little bit to make this 100% digitally accessible. So by the end of this presentation, you will be able to understand the basic structure of the source code, and you'll be able to read the source, most part of the source code as well.
Okay, I'm going to open up a
Yeah,
course
yeah,
so I can follow along.
yeah. Open up a file in Brightspace. That would be great.
Okay.
And I will do a little demo after this as well. So even though I'm a biologist, I don't know anything about coding at all. However, during my online teaching certificate program through SUNY CPT, this is the first time our instructor asked us to read the source code to make sure our file we used Blackboard at that time. We have to. This is the first time I had my training on reading source code during this online teaching certificate program, and I find it actually very useful. So I use some of the knowledge I learned from there as well as I incorporate my own research into this presentation. Again, where you can get this file, so you click upload and create in Brightspace, and then click create a file. So by creating a file in Brightspace, you actually creating a web page. So to understand the source code, let me give you some basic information of the definition. What's HTML? What's source code? So web browsers use HTML files to create web pages. What's HTML? HTML file is a text-only document. It contains codes written in the hypertext markup language. I will explain what's that. It defines how a web browser will display the content and structure of a web page. Web browsers read and interpret HTML files to display the web page. So basically, it's the file that make our computer display the web page we are looking at. So HTML files are fundamental files that create a web page, serving as a building blocks of a website. So what's HTML then? It's a hypertext markup language. Hypertext, you must have heard about it, right? When you write an email, you want to enter a hyperlink, right? And so that's related to hypertext. Hypertext that is text that can be clicked on and contains links to another context, such as another web page, an image, a video, audio, etc. It supports a non-linear navigation between content through hyperlinks, which probably most of us already use. And what's markup language? Because HTML is a hypertext markup language. A markup language is a coding system for annotating text by defining its structure, purpose, presentation, etc. The codes inform the computer program regarding the interpretation and the display of the text. And the source code I just opened up, that's the code. That's the code using this hypertext markup language. And so how do HTML files define a web page? There are three main functions. First, the HTML file serving as the container of the context web page, including the actual text, the image, the video displayed on the web page, such as the file we create in Brightspace. If you insert a video for the students or image, right? So it's all actually contained in the HTML file. Also, it organizes the structure of the context web page by using a system tags. So this is essential for accessibility, and I will expand on this later, right? But it consists of system tags, including defining the image, headings, paragraphs, list, a lot of other things to organize the content into meaningful sections. So these tags we'll expect later. And also the HTML file style the appearance of the web page and the interactivity to the web page by working in conjunction with other kinds of codes such as CSS and JavaScript. Yeah, so basically this HTML file, it actually contains the real information, the text, the image, the video, plus it defines the structure and appearance. So that's the basic function of HTML file. There are many other functions, but these are the three main functions. And then what's the source code? So when instructor create or view a web page of a file in Brightspace, we see the render results of the HTML file using the source code function. I just showed you at the beginning of this presentation. We can see the raw HTML document or the raw code that's used by the web browser, right? So the source code we are looking at are basically this hypertext markup language, and they provide information for our computer to display the web page. And when we look at the raw file, it's the source code of the HTML file. So the source codes are readable raw codes written using the HTML language, and the HTML tags in this language are part of the source code. They provide structure and the meaning of the course content, and they are enclosed in angle bracket. So I will show you some of the tags. So the first group of tags I want to show you is define the basic document structure. It provides information regarding the essential framework of the web page, such as first one, the doc type HTML declares the document type and the version of the HTML file. And HTML is at the beginning of every HTML file. It's a root element. It includes all other HTML elements. So you will see this for sure in the HTML file. And the hand section, tag, right, in the angled bracket is it's a tag, right? The head tag contains the metadata about the document. And the information in this under this head tag is actually not visible on the web page. However, later I will present that is essential for screen readers. And that's why we need to modify the head section to make it more accessible. And then the title as well is important. It sends the title of the page which appear in the browser's title bar or tabs, which is also essential for accessibility. And the body contains all the visible content of the web page, such as text, images, and link. So in conclusion, in the HTML file or the source code, there are codes that actually are not, the information under some of the codes are actually not displayed at all, but some of them are essential for accessibility. Okay, another group of tags I want to introduce are these tags that are used to organize and style the visible content of a web page. And some of them are very important for accessibility. For example, the H1 to H6 tag define the handing of different levels from the highest H1 to the lowest H6, which means handing 1 to handing 6. So these tags I will expand later in this presentation. And to read other parts of the source code, the rest of the tag could be very important, such as the P tag define the paragraph of the text. The A is an anchor element. It defines a hyperlink. And you would say something like href attribute under the A tag to specify a destination of a URL. And I will show you later in the source code. So this is a quite common one. I pick up the most common one. And another common one we use is the image in our Brightspace file. When we embed the image, the source code will show up under this img tag. And the source code use the src attribute, means source, for the image source, and art for alternative text. And in the source code, we'll read alt equal, and that's in the code, it's basically the alt text for the image, and we'll expand on this later as well. So this is important for accessibility as well. And also video as well. So video, it also have a source attribute as well as or text, and also a width and height of the dimension of the video. However, the video also for accessibility, it also needs this needs a transcript at the bottom of the video as well. So we won't touch on this part because it's not part of the source code. And also, if I highlight some text in bold, and that will show up as a B or strong in the source code, or if I italicize the text in our file, it will show up in the source code under the I tag or the EM tag. So these are the common ones we might use in our Brightspace files. And another group of tags that's important for accessibility is those tags that structure the data of the web page, such as the UL tag defines the unordered or bulleted list, while the OL tag defines the ordered or numbered list, such as 1, 2, 3, rather than the bulleted list. And LI define a list item within a list, so it's a nested list. And the table we may use define table, TR define table row, TD define a standard table data cell, and TH define the handler cell, which is very important for accessibility as well. It's define the handler of the table. And lastly, another group of tags that I think is very important is the handlers, and it contains the introductory information and or center navigation link. So this may not be applicable for Brightspace, but in a normal web page, you have the navigation bar. So that's information is within the handler. And also section tag define a generic section of the document. Each section should have a heading, H1 to heading 1 to heading 6 to identify its themes, right? So under each section, you can start over with H1 to H6. And footer define a footer for a document or a section, typically contain authorship and copyright information. Script tag used to embed or reference of executable code, usually the JavaScript. And I included it because I find some of the code in Brightspace have this tag in there. And style used to embed CSS style, which is common in Brightspace files, information directly into the HTML document. And span, this one we will get back to later in the presentation, is used to apply CSS style or JavaScript to specific text or other inline elements. So span, you can have it tag a sentence in the file. For example, later we'll talk about you can define the different language, right? So basically it defines a piece of text in the HTML file in the source code. Okay. So yeah, so you have this presentation. You can always refer back to this common text that you may encounter when you read a source code of the HTML file in Brightspace. And as I demonstrate at the beginning of this, any questions?
Um, yes, I'm trying to get like to the right spot in my Brightspace course so I can find the source code I got. So just one second. And I'm trying to open your
Uh-huh,
PowerPoint
uh-huh,
also.
uh-huh.
Uh okay.
Yeah. So in this, what I'm displaying shows how to get to the source code. If you have any file in Brightspace, and you can first click edit HTML at the bottom of your web page in Brightspace,
I
right?
am not there yet. Just so you know, just so you know, um, I have some difficulties working in the digital workspace because of some visual spatial difficulties that I have. So
Yes.
um I'm like having trouble getting to where you are.
Oh, I see. So let me show you one thing that you may not have a HTML file, but let me show you this in Brightspace. So do you have a introductory like for example, at the beginning of the course, you may have a start here section. Do you have seen
Um,
like this? You write in Brightspace?
um hold on a sec.
Yeah, like any of these files you have is a web page, and I will show you.
Um, I don't have a start here, but I have it organized into weeks and I have
Okay, that's fine.
um
If you have a similar file like this, you click on the file. So click on the file leads you to a um, like a HTML editor, right? You just click on any file, it will. Do you have this editor opening up?
not yet. Not I don't know if I'm in the right view.
Oh, I see. Yeah, like any file. So some of the file you can click edit HTML file. Some of them like at the beginning of the module, you just click on it. It will lead you to this editor.
Um,
Like you can
so
show.
I'm looking at one of my weekly modules and I have things that are labeled as a
Mhm.
web page and I don't
Yeah.
remember how to how
Could you
to
share your screen? Like I can show you.
okay, sure.
Yeah.
Uh, do you see my desktop or like a picture of an animal?
Let me see. Yeah, I
Oh,
don't see any. Okay, now I see your laptop, the desktop.
yeah. Let me try again. Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So let me see. Yeah, so this is not really, if you scroll down a little bit, let me see if you have another file. Yes, you do. You click on the common communication style, just click on there. Yeah,
Okay.
so that you open your web page and you scroll down, and then click Edit HTML web page.
Okay.
Yes, click
Thank
on
you.
that. Yes, perfect. And then, you can, do you see the three dots there? The three
Here?
dots? Yeah, click on there. Okay. And then in the second row, the third one, yeah, that's a source code
Okay.
editor. Yeah, click on there
All right.
and that shows your source code. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, let me continue share my screen. Okay, and then I will show you how to edit that one.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so I just went through this with you. Now you have this window open, right? Okay, yeah, so it's like you click edit HTML, and then in the HTML editor, you click the source code editor right here, and it will open up this editable source code file pop-up window. And from here, I will introduce 5 different ways or 5 different elements to make this web page fully accessible. So first, when we create a web page, we usually copy a text, for example, from our syllabus, right? We copy some text. We may not directly write in the file. So when we copy any text from for example, from a Word document, and once we copy into that HTML file editor, and it has a pop-up window ask you, do you want to remove formatting or do you want to keep formatting? So for accessibility, always remove formatting. Let me explain why. Because copying and pasting text from another document, such as Word, Microsoft Word, into a Brightspace file editor, bring this junk HTML code. This junk code may not affect the text when reading the HTML file without a screen reader. However, it could cause issues for people who use a screen reader to read the HTML file. So basically, when we copy text into HTML editor. And the formatting from, for example, Microsoft Word will be copied together because the source code is there. And it will be copied into the source code of our HTML file, which can cause issues for screen readers because it can abstract the meaningful structure of the headings and the logical flow. And it can slow down the comprehension because the screen reader still reads the irrelevant information. That's why we want to always remove formatting and make it a clean text. And we can still copy and paste text. It just we need to remove the formatting. And Brightspace actually make it easier because whenever you copy a text into the HTML editor, it asks you, do you want to remove formatting? You just click remove formatting. And or another way to do it is, for example, in Blackboard where we were using, and it doesn't have this pop-up window for remove formatting. However, you can, when pasting text in Brightspace editor or other learning management system, you can use a keyboard shortcut. For PC, it's Control Shift V. For Mac, it's Command Shift V. When you paste using this way, it can remove the formatting of their copied text. Right, so that's the easiest, one of the easiest way to achieve accessibility is always remove formatting to make the source code very clean without junk code. And another one is related to something called a head section in the source code. Let me first define what's a head section, right? So it's basically the top part of your HTML source code. A head section data is information about the HTML document that's not visible on the actual web page. However, it's important, right? The HTML tag, the head section data include title. It's a required tag. However, Brightspace, when you establish a web page, it doesn't automatically have that. And I will show you later in this presentation. It's a required tag. And I will show you why it's important for accessibility. It's the title of the document. It's used by search engines and screen readers. And then there could be metadata tag, metadata about the document, such as the description, authorship, keywords, and then the doc type declaration, such as a doc type exponential point, doc type HTML, it declares the documentation type and tell the web browser which version of HTML to use. So this is important as well. And the link tag, link to the external CSS or JavaScript file or the CSS code and JavaScript codes are embedded within the source code. And some of the template in our Brightspace, I saw you using one of the template for your Brightspace files. Actually, if you open up the source code, they could have some in your hand section as well. So, however, for accessibility, the most important one is the title. Why the title tag? We need to add them to the source code because they are important. Why is that they are important? Because the title HTML tag is critical for web page accessibility. The first thing read by a screen reader when a web page loads. Right. So without this information, screen reader won't be able to have this title. And also, in addition to being the first thing the screen reader read, Also, it helps users switch to a correct page tag effectively. And for example, you have multiple tabs open in your one browser, and the screen reader, people would be able to use the screen reader to navigate the different tab because the title information right here is indicated in the tab. So in the source code, it looked like this. I highlighted right here. And all you need to do is copy and paste the following code in the third line. And we'll talk about the second line later. In the third line of your source code editor, you just copy it. And for example, in this code, the title for my page is called Module 1 Reading Material 1. And then you just delete this information and add your own unique title. And for each page should have a unique title so that when screen readers read between different tabs, each tab is unique, right? If you give a same title for every page, then the tab have exactly the same information. So that is confusing for people who use screen readers. So yeah,
Mhm.
so you just, any questions? I will show you. Yeah, I will show how to do this later.
Okay.
Yeah, I will do a demo later. I just want to
Okay.
give you the information first. And yeah, so later we will copy and paste this text there, and we'll change the title, and then that will make the title there, right, in the source code, and the screen reader will read this title immediately when student click your file. That's the first thing the screen reader reads is the title, right? Even though it's not displayed in your web page. So that's part of the hand section, which is not displayed. Another thing we can use is the language tab, right? So because why do we need to define the language? Because most screen readers, they switch pronunciations based on the language defined. That's why it's important. If you use multiple languages, especially you use multiple languages, you want to define certain section as another language, right? Also, we want to, if you only English is used, we also need to let the screen reader know it's English, right? Which is the default. And the language declaration in the source code use a language attribute in the opening HTML tag. For example, HTML lang means language attribute equal en means English, right? So if you use any other different language, here's the table with 9 of the most common languages used in the world. So that you have different code. If you have different other language in addition to this, I have a link for you in the next page. You can click on that link, which will lead to all other languages. So, and also another complication is we not only need to use the HTML tag, we also need to define it for the XML tag. So because it is for XHTML, it's called Extensible Hypertext Markup Language. Don't worry about the definition. It's just another version of HTML file. So this web pages is used by many websites and was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium to combine the basic structure and element of HTML with several strict syntax rules. And also, so for this kind of version of HTML, which Brightspace may use, we can also include the XML language attribute, right? So it's HTML language, we can add another XML language attribute so that it applies to this version of HTML file as well. And I will show you how to do it in the next page. So for example, if you only use one language in the entire page, right? For example, just English, and you just copy and paste the following code, which is highlighted here as well. So it has HTML, XML. So what I just talked about the XML explains what's XML. So it's HTML, XML language equal English. And language equal English means both HTML and XML, right? And it's part of the hand as well. So if your language, for example, if you use French, and for the entire web page, you just change the EN to FR, right? So if it's not English, I have this link here for you to lead to all kinds of other languages as well. So this apply for only one language. However, if you use multiple languages in your same web page, we can also define it for the screen reader to change its pronunciation. So overall, the language attribute in the hand section is still needed. And if you have multiple languages, right, in the hand section, indicate the most commonly used language of the web page, or indicate the first language that appears in the web page if languages are equally used in the web page. For example, you have half English, half Spanish. If English appear first, right, define that in your hand section first. Or if English is the most common used language in the web page, you have a little bit Spanish, then you can define that later and use English as a language in your hand section. And then let me show you how to define a specific portion, a specific paragraph, or specific text in your source code to define that as another language. So the language code can also be changed for a specific portion of the text within the paragraph. You just add the LNG attribute to the span tag. So span define a certain section of the paragraph or certain section of the text. So here I have an example. So in your source code, for example, the paragraph says, this paragraph starts in English. The word hello in French is, and then you follow the French word in your display is called, I'm not good at French, but it's called bonjour, right? So you want to define this bonjour, you want the screen reader to pronounce it as French, right? So first you write this angle bracket and span. Language equal FR means language is French, and then you write down the language, the words, and then span again, right? So it's easy. You just copy this in there and then change bonjour into whatever, for example, a Spanish, right? And then you just change the FR to what's for Spanish, ES, right? Change the FR to ES. So yeah, so this code you can copy there and change the word to the sentence or the phrases in another language and change the language code as well. So that will define that part for the screen reader to use another pronunciation. So that's the language. So far, let me review what we learned so far. We take a quick break here. Let's review what we learned so far. So first, when we paste any text, we want to remove formatting because without removing formatting, it brings junk code that can confuse the screen reader. And also, we want to give the HTML file a title. And also, we want to give HTML source code language. So let me do a demonstration, and I will have two more parts we can make the web page accessible. So let me show you a demo here. So this is my module 1. I have this web page open up, and then edit HTML, and then click the source code. Do you see in my hand section, I have this HTML, right? HTML, language English, I just explained, and also the title. And then I just, this is in the PowerPoint slides as well. I'm copying this here. So I just copy that. And then I go back to a web page I just created as a demo web page in my module 1. So yeah, so this is a demo web page I created just to show. So after I use one of the templates Brightspace provide, and then I did HTML. So when I use the templates, the source code actually does not have the information about language and the title. So what I do is I open up the source code. If you can just click return, that give you to the second page. And then you just click Ctrl+V or Command+V for Mac. I copy my code, right? Do you see I just copied my 2 lines of code in there in this new HTML file. So I'm still using English, so I just still use EN. If you use French for the entire page, you change to FR. For example, if you use Spanish, change to ES, right? So I'm just keep it as English. And also for the title, so title, my previous page is Module 1, Reading Material 1. So I can change it to my title as Module 1, right? You just change the title in the code, right? I can do it Module 1, for example, Class 5, right? So that's my title of my web page. So it's easy. You just copy these two lines and paste in this new page at the beginning, right after the first line, and then you just enter the title for your unique title that apply for your web page, and then click save, and that's all. So is that easy, right? Any questions?
Well, I'm actually lost, but
Yeah,
um, I,
yeah, I can copy the code to your, yeah, let me copy the code to the chat. Okay, so I'm copying the code to the chat now. You can copy it now from the
okay.
chat. Yeah, copy these two lines in the chat.
Hmm.
Could you show me your source code editor? I can show you how to do it.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. So if you have your mouse on after the doc type equal HTML after the first line, yeah, click there after first line. After click the first line at the end of the first line. You can click there. Yeah. Okay, and hit return, and then paste. Paste my text in the chat there. Okay, perfect. And then you can just edit module 1 reading material 1 to your title of your page.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just delete the text there and change to your own title.
Forgot what the title was. Um,
Yeah, you just like, for example, you just write down, yeah, whatever title you write down there and click save. That will be perfect for the screen reader. Yeah, so just write any title there. Okay, perfect. And then click save. Yeah, so that will define the language for the screen reader to read this page, and then it will give a title. For example, student open this in a tab, and that's the first thing student hear from a screen reader. Yeah, so this is
okay.
this is perfect. You did great. Okay,
Thanks.
you're welcome. So let me so I did that demo, and let me continue the presentation. And okay, let me share the screen. Okay, so now we know how to define the title and how to define the language. I have two other ways. Um, yeah, so we did this, is to check alternative text for the image. And alternative text is a concise description of the image that includes information for the users of screen reader to allow them to understand the image's content and context as well. So it's mostly the content of the image and also the context of the image. And it's a crucial part of the image source code, and it's important for users of screen readers. And for the alternate text, it's under the alt attribute, ALT attribute within the image tag that contains the actual text. And however, you don't need to write this alt text into the source code because alternative text is asked for when uploading an image to the HTML file in Brightspace. So whenever you upload the image in Brightspace HTML file, it will ask you, right? There's a pop-up window ask you the alt text. And you can just write down there and click save, and it will be automatically embedded in your source code. However, source code is a place that you can make sure it's there by reading the source code, right? So it's under the image img tag, right? It's a alt attribute and where I highlighted here. So when reading the source code, you can make sure it is there, right? For example, I have my source code explaining the diagram of Bloom taxonomy, right? So that's my source code right there. And however, you can upload the image, like the image I just showed in my web page. It's just a watercolor. It's full, you know, it's a decorative image, right? So for decorative image that convey no information, the alt attribute should also be included, but should be left empty. Basically, alt text equal, right? There's nothing, no text there, and you don't need to edit anything in the source code because whenever you upload an image in Brightspace, and there's a bar you can click by saying, it's a decorative image, right? You could declare it as a decorative image in Brightspace whenever you upload the image. So this is easy. We don't need to do anything for the source code. However, in the source code, you can double check that your alternative text is there for their images. Okay, so that's number 4. And lastly is a heading, which is essential, which is very important. So this is it's called a structured context, is one of the 5 principles for accessibility. And to make a structured context, these things are essential. They are defined as tag H1 to H6, heading 1, 6. The headings serve as a table the web page and provide the user of screen readers a logical structure of the web page. Source code offer a convenient way to check the headings all at once. Because in Brightspace, you highlight your heading 1, right? You can double check the highlighted in your text editor is heading 1. However, you don't need to highlight each of your heading to double check. You can just open up the source code editor and look at them all at once, which I will show you. And first, let me define what's heading 1, heading 2, etc. So heading 1 is a main heading for the entire page. It often serves as the title of the page, and it's displayed, right? The title we just defined in the head section is actually not displayed. However, H1 is actually serve as a title. It's the main heading of the entire web page. And then it can be followed by hierarchical structures with lower level headings. And again, H1 is a main heading for the entire page, while H2 is a sub-heading or for the major sections or subtopic of one page. And then you can have headings 3, 4, 5, 6, and the sub-headings for further subdivisions. So let me show what it look like in the Brightspace file, a source code file. So this is a source code here. So here's my heading 1. And then I have when I open up this source code, I don't need to highlight each of my heading to say if it's heading 1. I can just say, okay, this is heading 1. My heading 2 is here. Heading 2, another heading 2 is a reading guide, right? Another heading 2 is discussion questions. So these 3, reading material, reading guide, and discuss questions, they are equally placed as my heading 2, right? And then I can read my list, right? So this is unordered list, and this is list under the list. And so it's just when you write the text in Brightspace, you want to define heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, essential. But source code is very convenient way to look at them all together, right, in a hierarchical structure. And for accessibility, I have a checklist for your heading text. First, it's a best practice to use only one heading 1. So if you use multiple heading 1, it's still accessible. However, it's a best practice commonly used is only one heading 1 serve as the title of a web page. And then you can have a heading 2 that leads your other major sections, the subsections. And secondly, check if there are any misheadings, such as text that are visibly styled as heading but are not marked up as heading. And thirdly, check that no level of headings are skipped. For example, no heading 2, but you have heading 3, right? So source code offer a convenient way to look at them all at once. Okay, so here I have a conclusion of the 5 steps that make your Brightspace files fully accessible. So instructor can edit and check the source code HTML file to make sure it's fully digitally accessible. Number 1, when we paste the text into Brightspace, always remove formatting because it brings junk code that can confuse the screen reader. Secondly, and the title to the hand section, because that's the first thing a screen reader reads when a web page is loaded. And also the title information is also displayed in the text of the web browser, so that it helps the screen reader to navigate through between different tabs, right? And then you want to indicate language for the web page, because screen reader can switch languages when they read certain part of your web page. And fourthly, and check the alt text for the image. Make sure the alt text is there, right, in the source code for your image, so that screen reader can read them for people who don't read the image. And number 5, check the heading in the source code, because headings are essential for screen reader users because it shows them the logical structure of the information. So today I only covered how to use source code. However, there's many other aspects to make your web page or your file in Brightspace accessible. So here I refer to our digital accessibility website offered by SUNY Oswego. Here I provide a link. We have written and a video tutorial that have a step-by-step instructions for you to make your Brightspace web page accessible. And today I only cover the source code part of it. Any questions?
I tried to download your slides. My PowerPoint wasn't opening.
Oh, I can email it to you.
That would be great.
Yeah, would you
Thank
please
you.
type your email address there
Okay.
in the chat? I will email it to you. Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, it's not, you don't need any background of source code coding and thing. I don't have any background either. But I find it's easy to use. Because firstly, I use Brightspace file, it's always show me 99% accessible. I don't know what's going on, so I did some Google research, and then once I paste the title information, the language information, it gave me a 100%.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. I will email you my slides immediately after this presentation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for attending this workshop.
You're welcome. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.